We are going to start our talk this evening, so I ask everyone to pay maximum attention. First of all, we have to remember that there are 7 sublime lords and 7 truths, and this invites us to reflect. Certainly, there are 7 Dhyani Buddhas. 5, in reality and in truth, have served until this Aryan race. 2 will come in the 2 future races, the 6th for the 6th race and the 7th for the 7th race. The one within my insignificant person, which is worth nothing, is the last of this race, the 5th. But we must make a complete distinction between what are Buddhas of contemplation and the earthly bodhisattvas. Unquestionably, the Buddhas of contemplation are the prototype of the earthly bodhisattva. The Buddhas of contemplation in themselves are father, mother, because every Buddha is dual. In each Buddha, there is a masculine principle, the father, and a feminine principle, the divine mother Kundalini Shakti. Some Oriental authors think that Anupadaka, which is the Buddha of contemplation, is himself the father-mother, that the glorious complement of any earthly bodhisattva does not have a father-mother. Such a concept seems wrong to me, because any Buddha of contemplation, any father-mother, glorious complement of the bodhisattva, obviously has emanated from the eternal, common, cosmic Father. This is what we have to know and understand. And from the unmanifested Divine Mother, the unmanifested Prakriti. The eternal common cosmic Father is dual. He is the Father-Mother. From him, in turn, emanates the Buddha of contemplation, the particular Father-Mother of any Bodhisattva, and this you must understand. So, I don't think Anupadaka, the Father-Mother, is an orphan. I think that the inner Father-Mother of each of us emanates from the eternal common cosmic Father-Mother, coessential with the absolute abstract space. So I allow myself to disagree with some authors about the term Anupadaka, that is, the Buddha of contemplation, devoid of father and mother, because he is, within himself, the father and mother of a bodhisattva. Actually, Anupadaka is something more than all that. He is the Buddha of contemplation that has emanated from the eternal, common, cosmic Father. Each of us has his Father who is in secret, and each of us has his Divine Mother Kundalini, and the Bodhisattvas of the Buddhas of contemplation are no exception. We are the unfolding of the Father-Mother, and we appear here among humanity to show the path, the way to others. It is necessary that you understand all this. Obviously, the 7 of us are the prototypes for all the Buddhas of this planet Earth. This does not mean that the Buddhas by themselves do not have their individual prototype, their Father-Mother. We only clarify that the 7 in themselves constitute the prototype for any Buddha, and this has to be understood. There are 7 sublime lords and 7 truths. Each truth is contained in one of the 7. Yes, my profound inner God has the truth about force. Obviously, the god of Mercury, Raphael, will have the truth about science, about wisdom, and the god of Saturn about death, etc. So there are 7 truths. This is obvious. But what I am saying is repeated in every human being. Much has been said about the mind, as if there is truly only one mind. Certainly, there are 7 minds. First, starting from the bottom, there is the sexual mind. Second, the instinctive mind. Third, the motor mind. Fourth, the emotional mind. Fifth, the purely intellectual mind. All of these 7 minds are very important. That the instinctive center has a mind, it is true. That the emotional center has a mind, it is certain. That the intellectual center has a mind, it does. Who could deny it? That the motor center has a mind, nobody can deny it. There are 7 minds. One is amazed, for example, by the instinctive mind, how it governs all organic processes so wonderfully. One is amazed by the sexual mind, how it governs the sexual activities of the human being. One is amazed by the motor mind, how wisely it directs the movements of the organism. One is amazed by the emotional mind and the intellectual mind. But don't forget that the 3 inferior centers of the organic machine, that is, the sexual, instinctive and motor centers, which form a wonderful triangle, a splendid triangle that can perfectly handle the 3 forces, the positive, negative and neutral of electricity. This is truly amazing. As for the purely emotional mind, obviously that leaves us much to think about. But emotion also has a mind, and for the intellectual mind, we already know about it. So the instinctive, emotional, intellectual, motor and sexual centers, they all have mind. And there are 2 types of superior mind, the superior emotional mind and the superior mental mind. Unfortunately, these types of mind are unattainable to human beings, inaccessible, unreachable. Whoever in reality and in truth wants to get in touch with the superior emotional mind and with superior mental mind must succeed in bringing the personality to a passive state. And whoever wants to live continuously in contact with the two superior centers, the emotional mind and the mental mind, will have to disintegrate not only the ego, but the personality as well. A lot has been said about the centers of the human machine. A lot has been explained perfectly about the instinctive center, about the emotional center, about the mental center, about the motor center, about the sexual center. A lot has been said, indeed, plenty has been said. But what has not been well clarified is the fact that each center has a mind, and that both the superior emotional mind and the superior mental mind are the two most elevated ones. Thus, each of these minds of the 5 centers of the organic machine has its own mind, and each of the superior emotional and superior mental centers has its own mind also. So there are 7 minds, 7 spheres of action of the mind. There are 7 minds, and each of them contains a truth. The 7 contain the 7 truths. This is why the brothers must understand the relationship that exists between the macrocosmos and the microcosmos. Once that is comprehended, one can move forward. These 7 minds totally control the organism, especially the 5, because as I said, the 2 superior ones are, for now, inaccessible to human beings, but the 5 minds of the intellect, emotional, motor, instinctive and sexual centers completely control the organic machine. These 7 minds regulate all our activities. Unfortunately, we always have a bad secretary in the intellect, and this is actually the ego, the I. The 3 brains of man are related to the 5 centers of the human machine. Intellect, emotion, movement, instinct and sex are related to the same machine. The instinctive center, the emotional center, and the motor center are worthy of our attention. Obviously, the motor instinctive sexual center is a perfect triangle. The motor instinctive sexual center does not hold antagonisms of any kind. This is why, in general, we talk about the 3 brains: intellectual center, emotional center, and motor instinctive sexual center. Like I said, we have a bad secretary. This one is responsible for sending messages, sending representations, sending impressions to the wrong centers. It sends, for example, an impression to the instinctive center when it should not go to the instinctive, but to the sexual. Or it sends an impression that is for the intellectual center to the emotional center. Or it sends an impression that is for the emotional center to the motor instinctive sexual center. Thus, human beings live completely wrong due to the ego, the I, the myself, the one self. And this is the big problem. These 7 minds would work wonderfully if the bad secretary did not exist inside of us. The ego, the I, the myself, the one self. Herein lies the serious thing. Up there, in the macrocosm, the 7 planetary spheres work in perfect harmony. Everything works correctly. Unfortunately, here below, in the microcosm, man, everything goes wrong. The 7 minds work more or less abnormally due to the ego. Messages that are, for example, for the intellectual center, reach the sexual center. Messages that are for the emotional center reach the motor center. The conclusion is, everyone lives incorrectly. In these conditions, everything is wrong. The 7 minds work in the wrong way due to the ego, due to the I, due to the myself. The same thing does not happen up there in the macrocosm. The 7 minds work marvelously. Why? Because everything is in harmony there. Each of the 7 planets has its own mind, and each mind of these is working in perfect harmony with the entire cosmos. Herein lies what is interesting. As for the 7 Buddhas, they have their synthesis in Avalokiteshvara. Who is Avalokiteshvara? He is the synthesis of the 7. He is the Logos, strictly speaking, the solar Logos. Gautama Shakyamuni, in fact, is the Bodhisattva of Buddha Amitabha. But Gautama is only the earthly Bodhisattva. The important thing within Gautama is the Buddha of contemplation. This is the fundamental thing. Whoever attains the Buddhic state has put the 7 minds in order. But to achieve the Buddhic state, one needs, first of all, to have gone through the Buddhist annihilation, which is to have disintegrated the ego, the I, the myself, the one self. When one has gone through the Buddhist annihilation, the 7 minds will march in perfect harmony with the entire cosmos, and then this man is perfect in the most complete sense of the word. But while the ego still exists, the 7 minds will be in disharmony, in disorder, in a bad situation managed by a bad secretary, the ego, which, as I said and I am repeating, sends the messages that are for one center to another, making chaos within ourselves, chaos within our 7 minds. We need, then, to accelerate the process of the disintegration of the ego. And for this, you need the fire, the sacred fire, Fohat. Obviously, Fohat, during manifestation, is one thing, but Fohat outside the 3-dimensional world is different. during the unmanifestation, in the cosmic nights, Fohat is the transcendental sexual electricity. Unquestionably, electricity at the dawn of any creation organizes atoms within molecules. It organizes and it creates. There are those who think that electricity comes from an individual entity, from one of the many beings that belong to the army of the Great Word. But in reality and in truth, I say that electricity comes directly from the Ancient of Days, from the glory of Shekinah, from the Ancient of Centuries, from the Father who is in secret. Unquestionably, it has within itself the power to organize atoms within molecules, the power to organize worlds. In it is the potential of making any creation. For this reason, my dear brothers, I consider that electricity in itself is sacred, that we must look at electricity with profound respect, with great veneration. This of the 7 minds is also related to the number 7. We know it well that the cubic stone has 7 aspects, and that the 4 cardinal points are in the cubic stone. The part facing upward would be the 5th cardinal point. The one facing down would be the 6th point. In the center is the 7th. Thus, in the center of the cubic stone of Yesod, in the center of the philosopher's cubic stone, a master has to measure himself, for he is crucified, to measure himself in relation to the stone, to understand what is his degree of intimate self-realization. The adept who has reached the qualifying 7th grade, the qualifying 7th initiation, obviously handles the 7 minds with perfection. He receives, after disintegrating the ego and the personality, the baptism of fire, and this is transcendental. This is why in the book of Revelation by St. John, when the 7th seal is reached, when the 7th seal is broken, it is said that the kingdom of God has been consummated, just as he promised his servants, the prophets. There are 7 seals, 7 cups. This is something none of you can deny. And 7 trumpets. The book of Revelation by St. John, in reality and in truth, is the book of wisdom. It is the book that St. James, the great apostle, rolled up in his right hand. It is the book that guides the alchemists. Without revelation, the science of the great work could not be understood. We have to live the revelation externally or internally. If we live it externally, with all of humanity, we will have to endure the abyss and the second death. The Bible indicates this. The Bible begins with the creation of man and ends with the judgment of man. Therefore, the revelation is transcendental. There it speaks about the 7 angels. The Bible is sacred, especially the book of Revelation, because the book of Revelation is a hermetic book. The initiate has to break each of the 7 seals. The first seal belongs to the physical body. Then the initiate knows, by breaking that seal, the mysteries of the abyss. The second seal corresponds to the vital base of the human organism. By breaking this seal, the initiate knows the science which corresponds to the beheading of John the Baptist. By breaking the third seal, which belongs to the astral body, the initiate knows all the mysteries of the astral world, and his sidereal vehicle becomes a vehicle of pure gold. By breaking the fourth seal, which corresponds to the mental world, the initiate obviously knows all the mysteries of the universal mind, knows what the 7 minds are, and has organized them correctly. His mind, in synthesis, has been Christified. By breaking the 5th seal, which is the seal of the world of conscious will, obviously the initiate becomes the Son of Man. By breaking the 6th seal, which corresponds to the consciousness, or the intuitional Buddhic body, the initiate knows the mysteries of the soul spirit, the mysteries of consciousness. And by tearing the 7th seal, which belongs precisely to Shiva Tattva, the initiate then knows the mysteries of the being. There are 7 seals that one has to tear one by one. He who has torn the 7th seal receives the baptism of fire and remains internally enlightened. This is what the brothers must understand. But many complain about the lack of enlightenment. They say to themselves, "Well, I have worked a lot, studied a lot, and all in all, suffered a lot, and nothing. I have not reached enlightenment. Nothing, nothing. Nothing at all. What is happening to me?" They protest because their chakras are not developed. They protest because they cannot project into the astral. They protest because they do not know how to travel in the mental body. They protest because they cannot visit the White Lodge at will. They protest because they are asleep, unconscious. But they do not realize that they have not organized their 7 minds, and they could not organize them as long as the ego exists within oneself. They have the ego very much alive, fat, robust, and yet they are complaining. Why do these little brothers think of complaining when they have ego? While the ego exists, one has no right to obtain enlightenment. Where are they going to get it from? When the consciousness is bottled up inside the ego, where will they get enlightenment from? This is impossible. Dissolve the ego and you will have enlightenment. Dissolve the ego and you will organize the 7 minds wonderfully. But as long as you do not dissolve it, the 7 minds of the 7 centers in you will be distorted. So in reality and in truth, you have to work on yourself to be able to organize the 7 minds. Only he who has worked very hard on himself knows what it is to tear the 7th seal and receive the baptism of fire. Whoever tears the seventh seal and receives the baptism of fire comes into contact with the different parts of the profound inner being. Then enlightenment comes.